Hey YouTube, Ermin here, and I welcome you to this tutorial on Microsoft Access. I will be showing you how to use two really important objects in Access. First, I'll show you how to use and work with tables, and then I will show you how to use and work with reports. Everything about this tutorial, the description of it, and everything you need to know about it can be found under the description. You can also find the databases that I'm working with there. You will be able to download them so you can work along with me. You can also find information about myself and all kinds of other links. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and please subscribe if you enjoy it. Also, feel free to ask any questions you have by commenting below the video. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to this introduction on working with tables. I hope you're excited. I am excited to teach this class. I absolutely love Microsoft Access, and I want to show you my passion for it throughout this course. So what I thought made a lot of sense was to start looking at just one table. So the whole database right now is just one table. And I wanted to show you the complete table to start things off. I want to show you how to work with that completed table. And then in future lectures, we're going to have a chance to make our own tables. So this section will be about working with an already completed table so you understand how to add and delete records, filter, sort, and all other kinds of cool stuff. Now, what I want to show you in this video is simply some navigational knowledge so you can more easier work with tables. For example, how do we go about opening up this customers table? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. The first one is to just simply double click right here on the customers, and there we go. It opens up for us really nicely. We can go here and hit the X to close up the table. That easy. We can also open it this way. We can right click specifically, and just go ahead and open. There we go again, simple. And we can go ahead and close it. Now, one other thing that's really useful is this here on the left, where the table is, where it says here, all access objects. This is called the navigation pane. And let's open up the customers table again by double clicking it. What we can actually do is right here, this is a shutter bar and it's specifically an open close button. So what we can do is by clicking right here, we can actually close the navigation bar. And what that allows us to do, of course, is to see our table more easier. So it's really useful to do that as well. If we click back here on this button, we can bring back the navigation bar. We can actually also hide the actual tables here by clicking right here. So that's also really cool. Now, the main thing that you should know about tables is that there are two main views that you can work with when you're working with tables. The first one is the view that we're looking at right now. This is the datasheet view. And you'll see right now, if you go up here where it says home and view, you'll notice the datasheet view is already selected. But we can actually switch and go to the design view. And we're going to be using the design view later on when we create our own tables. We're going to be working with the design view. And so, for example, we can go back and forth just simply by being at home up here. So this navigation pane, and then the ribbon here, and we go back to datasheet view. So it's really that simple. So those are really the basic things. And by the way, you can also right click on customers and go design view that way. So often there's a couple of ways of doing the same thing. So that's it. In the next video, we're going to look at the datasheet view, and I'm going to show you some simple things like how to edit records, add and delete records. Thank you. All right, so in this video, let's learn the fundamentals of editing your table. So we'll just do a double click to open up our table. We already know how to do that. Notice that this first row is now highlighted. The customer ID is the field or column. And what would happen now is if I hit the backspace or delete, it would delete this whole thing. So let me just hit delete, and there you see it just gets rid of the whole thing. So that's the first thing that you kind of have to be careful with. By the way, the undo is right here if you make a mistake. So I'm just going to hit that and it brings it back. But that's the first thing to understand, is that Access highlights everything in that particular record. And if you hit the backspace or delete, it's simply going to delete it. And you can use tab to go across a row. So here I'm hitting tab and it's just going right across that row. Maybe I need to get to the end. Once it gets to the end, it's going to go to the next row. Now what you want to do, since everything is by default, everything is highlighted, you would just click with your mouse inside of there. And now you can hit backspace and delete a specific thing. Maybe this needs one letter change or something like that. So you could do that. I'm going to keep it the way it is. It was Anton. But what you can do once you're inside here is you can hit the home button and it's going to come to the beginning. Or if you hit the end button, it's going to go to the end. In the same way, if I'm using a tab like this, I can go across the row. But if I want to go all the way to the beginning of the row, once a whole row is highlighted like that, I can hit home and it's going to go right to the first field. If I hit end, it's going to go to the last field. Okay, so it's really, really useful as a way to jump around. The other thing that I can do as well is I can use the up and down arrow. So if I hold the down arrow, it just goes all the way down. If I hit the up arrow, it goes all the way up. And again, notice how everything is highlighted there. So if I hit backspace or delete, it's going to delete that whole thing. But of course, if I just click with my mouse inside, if I left click, then I can edit a specific letter and so forth. And if I want to go right to the front of this text, I can use my mouse like that and just click like that. But I can also use the end and the home to go back and forth. So that's really simple. You'll also notice here, down here, you have your record. So that's another way that you can go through the record. So a record is simply a row. So if I want to go up, that's the 21st record, 20th record. If I want to go down, I go this way. So really, really simple. And of course, here you have this bar to go to the end so you can see all of your fields. So that's really simple navigation. Now, what if I want to add a new record? Well, here's a new space where you can actually start typing in your new record. So let's say something like this. Glaze, okay? And then I can just hit tab and put in a name, John. All right, let's now talk about how to sort your table. So we'll open it up again. And all you do is you go where the field name is. So for example, here, company name. And you're just going to left click with your mouse on the actual field itself here, the gray part. And now it's selected. And you can go about it two ways. You can go up here and hit ascending, for example. And now we have it in ascending sort. Or we can do descending, for example. So now it's the other way around. Very cool. And if we want to remove that sort, it's as easy as clicking right here, remove the sort, and now that sort is actually gone. The other way we can do it is actually, we can again left click on the actual, it's already selected now, but if it wasn't, you can just left click on the actual field or column name, and you right click, and then simply go sort A to Z or sort Z to A, or Z if you prefer. I'm Canadian, so I prefer Z. So that's really all you have to do right there. And notice that when I did Z to A by right clicking here, up here it's changed to descending. So that's it, and I can just remove that sort like that. All right, everyone, let's look at some basic filtering. So the first thing that you want to do is, let's say we want to filter by city. So here's our city field or column. And what you want to do is simply go again on top of the field, very similar to the sorting, and we'll just go over city here, and we're going to left click. So now it's selected, right? And now what we want to do is we can go up here to filter. So we can click that, and it gives us some options here. So here's a list of all the cities in this case that we have. And of course, one thing that we can do is we can, let's say, take this check mark off or select all, because maybe we're only interested in one specific city or only a few. So we can just check mark the ones that we want. So here I just check Barcelona, and it turns out that there's actually only one customer that we have from Barcelona. So now we just have access to those particular clients in that city, of course, which can be really, really useful. The other really cool thing is you'll notice right here that toggle filter is selected. It's kind of more dark, so you know it's selected. And what you can do is you can go between the filtered state and the unfiltered state. So simply by clicking on toggle filter, this is your table again, totally unfiltered. If I click again on this toggle filter, well, now we're back to the state with the actual filter. To get rid of the filters is also super simple. You simply go here to advanced and clear all filters. And notice how easily it just goes away. So you'll notice a lot more options. We won't go into all of the options here, but if we again click on this city field, and then I'll go back here to filter, you'll notice that we also have some, for example, text filters. So this can get a lot more complicated. We can only pick, let's say, cities that begin with certain letters and so forth, or end with certain letters and so forth. We'll have a look at that later, but that is your basic filtering. All right, everybody, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the find and replace feature. Also really, really useful. So what I want to do is I'll go to country field right here, and I'll just left click it, and now it's selected. And then what I'll do is I'll do Control H, and that brings up the find and replace. Now I will go to find first. And what we can do is simply find whatever we want. Maybe we're looking in this case for Mexico. Mexico is already there. And notice that it says look in the current field, match the whole field, search all. That's all fine. But just make sure that in fact you do first select the field before trying this, or current field is obviously not going to work if you didn't actually select the field to begin with. So make sure, but if you do, you can go ahead and do find next, find next, find next. And once it finds all of the instances of Mexico in this case, in that particular field, it is finished and says we're finished searching those records. Now, you don't necessarily have to put in the whole name either. Really useful for the find feature, at least, is the asterisk, and this gets used also in filtering. You can use this for filtering as well. So let's say I do M asterisk. So that what the asterisk means is any letter. So we have to have an M to begin with, but then any other letter after that is okay. It can be an A, it can be an I, and so forth. So if I do that, it will still find Mexico. And if there was another country that was MI or something like that, it would also show it. So that's very cool. The other thing is for replace, you don't want to use the asterisk. It is not reliable. It doesn't work very well. So I would go ahead and just put in the actual whole name. So for example, Mexico, and then you would put in what you want to replace it with. And then simply you would click here, the replace. And if you wanted to replace all the instances of Mexico, you would just click replace all, and it would do it at one time. All right, so you're ready to create your first table. I hope you're excited. You're also going to learn about the importance of the primary key. So we'll get to that in just a second. So let's get started. To create your first table, you want to go up here to create, and there's two ways to go about it. The first one, I don't use and I don't like. So that way would be to just click on table, and what happens is it opens up the datasheet view. As you know, you can see here which view you are on. We are right now on datasheet view. I prefer to just close this up and go to table design, because what table design, when we click on it, it goes to the actual design view. And it's just a lot more intuitive to build your table here. And notice it has us on this first field, first row, and we can go ahead and type in whatever field we want to create. So often, just like our customers table, in a customers table, the first field would be something like customer ID. And then all we do is you can click on tab. That's, I think, preferable. It's going to take you over to the data type that you want to select. Now, in the table that we were looking at so far, they actually used short text. We can use something different. We can use, for example, auto number, and that is common. And what auto number is, anytime you create a new customer ID, it's going to give it automatically a new customer ID that is, of course, unique to all the others. And it is this uniqueness that explains the importance of a primary key. So now that I've created a field called customer ID and gave it a data type of auto number, what we can do is we can click up here where it says primary key. And notice now that on the side here, there's a key. And this means that our customer ID is our primary key. And this is important because what it means is that this field can only take in unique values. So it's going to create a unique number for each new record. And each new record or each new row represents a new customer. So it has to follow that rule, because of course, that is how we're able to know which customer we're dealing with. So that's amazing. So let's go ahead and we can actually tab here, and it's going to take us down to the second row, and we can create a new field as well here. So maybe we want something like first name, and then again we just tab and we'll select short text. So I would say that 80 to 90% of your data types will be short text. In fact, the table, the customers table we've been working with so far actually had every field was actually a short text data type, including their primary key. Their customer ID was also short text, and you can absolutely do that. Then we can tab. Maybe we want a last name field. Super easy, tab. we select short text. You will notice down here, it says field properties. We're going to be looking at that in the upcoming videos. A lot of important stuff to look at here. But in the next video, we're going to continue building our table. So stay tuned. All right, everybody, welcome back. So let's continue working on this table and create a few more fields. So maybe, for example, we might be interested in someone's address as well. So what kind of data type can we use here? Well, we can actually use short text again. And the reason is that the short text data type can actually take in letters, numbers, and even characters. So things like parentheses or a combination of all of these. So again, perfect. Short text is the reason that you're going to be able to use short text 80 or 90% of the time. So again, let's say we want to create a phone number field. Again, short text is totally fine. So if you have parentheses for the area code for the phone number, that's absolutely fine. You can absolutely use it. So let's now take a look. We can say that this is the completion of our table. I mean, we'll say that this is done. Of course, you can utilize a lot of other fields, but I think you get the idea of how you go about creating this table. But let's take a look at some of these other ones. So here you have number. So number you want to use when you're using non-monetary values. So if you have, let's say, a distance field or something like that, or kilograms or pounds or something like that, as long as it's non-monetary, you can use the number data type. If, on the other hand, you're using specifically monetary values, like the price of something, you can use currency instead. And you might ask, so what's the difference? Why would I want to use number over currency? Does it really matter? Well, yes, because the data type that you select determines the kind of values that you can store in that particular field. And it actually says that right here as well on this part of the screen. So keep that in mind. But it's a pretty easy thing to remember. We also have a really important one, date/time. So maybe if you have an orders table or something like that, orders from customers, you might want to use date/time to store when they ordered or when they got their shipment and so forth. We also have hyperlink. So let's say you have a field that's called website. So you can add a hyperlink. Attachment is pretty self-explanatory. Calculated is just a combination of the current fields that you have. So let's say if you brought first name and last name together, that would be a calculated field. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to just save your table. I've already gone ahead and saved mine. I've called it customers 1. But one way you can do that is to just click the X. So once you click the X, since you haven't saved it before, it's going to ask you, do you want to save? And then you're going to be able to give it a name. Okay, so just hit that X and do that. And then what we're going to do, so you're going to see your table now, whatever you've called it, on the side here. I've called mine customers 1. And I'll go ahead then and just open it. And you'll notice here that we have all of our fields that we've created, and obviously no records. We don't have any data for anybody, but that's fine. You'll notice that when I click and put in my first name, as soon as I start writing, because this is a primary key that is auto number, it just gives it an ID. As soon as I put in some information, you'll notice as soon as I go to the second record and start doing anything, putting in a name, it gives it an auto number. So this is now 2, and remember that it's always unique because a primary key always has to be unique, and it's going to be used to link it to other tables that are related but have also different kinds of information. Let's say we want to link customers to their orders, for example. So that is it. You've created your first table. Next, we're going to look at the properties, the table properties. All right, everybody, it is time to talk about field properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to looking at the customers table. We're going to double click on it. If I right click on tables, remember I can go to design view. And since we want to look at field properties, you do want to be in design view. That is where the properties are shown for tables. And you'll notice that right away, this customer ID field is highlighted. So the specific field properties down here are specific to the customer ID field. If we left click down here, now we have highlighted company name, and the field properties are specific for that field. And there we go. You'll notice that the field size is different for a lot of these, and in fact, for our customer ID field, the field size is 5. And you'll actually, this is really useful if you actually click. So right now we're on customer ID, and if I click on field size, you'll notice that on the right side here, you actually get some information, and it tells you exactly what that property controls. So it says it's the maximum number of characters you can enter in the field. The largest maximum you can set is 255. So since the field size is only 5 for customer ID, we can actually go back to the datasheet view, and let me try to create a new record. And I should not be able to create a new one with 6, and it doesn't let me. I'm now at 5, and it won't let me put in a 6th character. So perfect, that means it is working. So we'll go back. So that's awesome. And really, field size is not something that you have to worry about too much these days in terms of restricting the field size. And this is because computers have gotten so much better, so much more powerful, so much more efficient, a lot more memory. And this used to be a lot more important when computers didn't have a lot of memory and they really couldn't handle a lot of memory. Now they can. So it's really something you don't have to worry about too much. So next, we're going to talk about the format field property. And there's 2 kinds of formats that you have to know about. The first one are called predefined formats. And let's say we select here company name, the field name company name. We know that its data type is short text. If it has a predefined format, it's going to be, if you click on format, it's going to be here under the drop-down menu. So short text don't have any predefined formats, so that's why there is none here. But I'll show you just for fun here. I'll add date here, and I'm going to use the data type, of course, date/time. And dates do have a predefined formats. They're right here. So you see, as soon as I click on format, I can pick how I want to format my date. They have something called a general date, long date, medium, short, long time, medium time, and short time. So that's really cool. So we can just get rid of that, right click on it, and delete row. So let's go back to company name. We'll select company name, but actually I want you to go back to the datasheet view. We're going to save. And notice that company name right now, aside from, of course, the first letter, everything is lowercase. If we want to make everything uppercase, we can do that very easily. If we go back to design view, one of the custom formats for short text is this. It's like the greater than sign. So when we try to go back, it's going to ask us to save because we have applied a custom format. We try to go back to datasheet view, ask it, do we want to save? And look what's happened now. Notice how company name, everything is now in the company name field is uppercase. And it also means that if we want to apply or add a new record, even if we put it in lowercase letters, it's going to naturally, once we leave the field, it's going to make it uppercase. So if you want to enforce those kinds of formats, you can do that, though there's really not many ones that I use for the short text field. And finally, for this lecture, let me talk about input masks. So we'll go ahead and select the phone field, which is a short text data type. And if I click into input mask, remember you get a little information on the side. It tells you that it's a pattern for all the data to be entered in this field. An input mask is a lot like a format. You'll notice these three dots here. You can left click on that and it's going to open up. And input masks are really useful for things like phone numbers, postal codes, social insurance number. It's essentially a format or a certain pattern that you can use for these types of fields. So it can be useful. So I'll just go ahead and go next. And this is just an input mask wizard. So it gets you through it. So it's really, really easy. And this is the pattern of your phone number in this case. The 999 means that the area code is optional. If you don't want to make the area code optional and you want to enforce people to put in the area code, what you do is simply change this to 000. And now, whenever somebody tries to enter in a phone number, they have to include the area code. If you don't want to do that, and you want to allow somebody to just hit the space bar and bypass and just give you the 7 digits here, you can just put 999 in here. In any case, you can go to next. And then the last thing it asks you is, how do you want to store the data? Do you want it with the symbols or without the symbols? So it's up to you. Let's say here, I just select symbols, finish, and you will see down here that the input mask is now applied. And you're just going to want to go ahead and save it. So that is it for this one. We're going to look at more field properties in the upcoming videos. All right, everybody. So in this video, we're going to talk about default values and validation rules. So we'll start with the default value. And let's go and select company name. And again, just left click inside where it says default value. And again, it tells us what it is. It is a value that is automatically entered in this field for new items. Okay, so again, for new items, this, whatever you set it as, will get automatically entered when you're creating a new record for that field. Okay, so very, very simple. You want to make sure, especially when it comes to your number and currency data types, we don't have any in this case, but if you do, it's really important to just go through them and make sure that you don't have any default values there for your number and currency data types. Maybe you want one, but either way, be aware sometimes if you're not the only one working on it, there could be defaults there. And that could of course explain some of the issues you're having, or why some of the data doesn't make sense or something like that. So for numeric and currency, certainly keep that in mind. All right, so those are default values. Let me now talk about validation rules. So make sure first that you select company name. Of course, you do that by using the left click on your mouse. And then I want you to click inside of validation rule right here. Of course, on the right-hand side, it tells us what that property is all about. It's an expression that limits the values that can be entered in the field. So that might be a little bit abstract, a little bit unclear. So let's do it. So let's say I have noticed that people keep putting in an abbreviated version of company names, right? So maybe just like 3 letters, abbreviated version of a company name. And I really want to stop that. So I want to restrict it and make it so that you cannot put in any less than 4 characters. So it's got to be 4 equal to 4 or more characters when you enter those characters in the company name field. Okay, so the way I can do that is to use the length function. Very simple function to use. Most functions in Access are quite simple to use. len is the length function, and it returns the amount of characters in a string. I'm going to need opening parentheses, then I'm going to need square brackets. whenever you have the square brackets, you're putting in the field name. So company name is the field. We close those square brackets and then we close the parentheses, and then we will say greater than or equal to, let's say 4. So we'll now go back. It's going to ask to save. That's awesome. And now what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make a new entry. So I have to put in a customer ID. So let me put that in, and then I'll go here and let me try to just put in an abbreviation for the company, WZ, let's say, or something, or WG. And I try to enter to confirm that. And it tells you one or more values are prohibited by the validation rule set for customers.company name. Enter a value that the expression for this field can accept. So I won't accept it. If I try 3, will it do it? Nope. How about 4? Well, it should. Yep. So I hit enter and it goes into the next field. So that's absolutely awesome. Of course, we can right click on our mouse to get rid of that record. Okay, so let's go back to design view. So that's awesome. That works. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can actually put in a validation text, and that is, instead of having that default message pop up there, we can do a very specific message. So maybe you type in, please use whole, please, don't use abbreviations or something like that. And that will then help out. Okay, so that is the exact message that's going to pop up, and you can go ahead and try that yourselves to see that that is in fact the case. Actually, let me just go ahead and quickly do it so you can see that, but you can go ahead and do it on your computer as well. So let me just do that, and it tells you please don't use abbreviations. See, that's awesome. Okay, so let me just fill this in. Okay, and I'll go ahead and delete it. So that's really awesome. We're going to go back over here to the design view. All right, so now let's move on, and I want to show you another one that has to do with currency. So it wouldn't make sense to have a currency field inside of this particular customers table, but let's just assume it made sense. And I have something like item price. Okay, so item price, we would want to make that a currency data type. One thing, of course, that we can do with something like that is we can say, well, we want the item price to be, let's say, greater than 0. So something simple like that. So if somebody tried to input an item price that was 0, or that there are no items at your store that are below 50 cents or $1, they should never be able to put in a price lower than that. So really simple, really easy. I'll go ahead and delete this row. And that's it for this video. See you in the next one, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. In this video, I want to talk about a peculiar little feature in Access that can result in some big trouble for you. So I thought it would be important to cover it in this lecture. And the peculiar feature is that short text fields can actually be 0 length, which is a bit odd. And I'll show you really what that ends up meaning through a little example here. So we'll select contact name, and what we'll do is down here where it says required, we are going to make it a required field. Now, by the way, you can do this in 2 ways, changing it to yes. We can click on it and just do the drop down, or you can just do a left double click. So we do that and it changes to yes. So now contact name is required. And this is problematic for text fields because it's easy to actually bypass. Required is exactly what it says. We want to require someone to put in an actual contact name. We don't want them to be able to just bypass that field by not putting anything in there. But because of this peculiar feature for text fields, it actually makes it possible to have a 0 length. So notice I've changed this field, contact name field, required to yes. So we will go to the datasheet view. We'll save the table, and let me try to bypass it. Okay, so let me put in a new entry. Okay, I'll just put in some nonsense here. And then when I come into this field, all I'm going to do to bypass it is I'm going to put in a space. And this is actually considered okay. So because I've put in the space, I've actually entered something, and I'll be able to go back to design view no problem. Okay, so that's what it allows you to do. So if I go back again to the datasheet view, you will see that the record that I created exists. It's totally fine. So we'll go back again. And what you have to do in these cases is make sure that you change the allow 0 length field property. You want to put it to no. So we're going to have to do a new entry. So walls C, we'll make up another name, and nope. So you must enter a value in the customers.contact name field. Okay, so now even if I take a space, it's not going to allow me to do that. So perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen. All right, in this video, let's talk about lookups for a table. So lookups are used for a few different reasons. One of the main ones is when you want to limit the number of values for a particular field. And one of the reasons to do that is you want to prevent data entry errors. So you limit the number of values that can go in. And I'm going to show you how to do that a couple of different ways. Well, a lot of different ways. I'll show you a couple of those. Earlier, I made a table called Customers 1. If you have that one still with you, open it up. If not, just you can follow along. I'll go to Design View. And let me just add an extra field. And that field will be area city. So it's going to represent the area of a city. And it's going to be short text. So let's suppose that you have stores, but you only have stores in the New York area, the 5 boroughs of New York City. So this would be a reason to create a lookup as an example. And you would go down here where it says field properties, and you see here where it says lookup. So what you would want to do is you would want to click in here. And again, on the right side, gives you a little information, tells you it's the type of control to use to display this field on forms. We're going to talk about controls a bit later when we talk about reports, so you'll get good knowledge of controls. But right now, as you see, the default display control is a text box. And the thing with the text box is that it doesn't have any field properties that you usually see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it, and we're going to change it to a combo box. And the combo box is the one that has all of these properties that just popped up when I selected it. So it's important, and I'll show you why it's important. One of the properties is really important in our case if we do indeed want to prevent certain values from being entered. So now notice here the row source type is a table and a query. In our case right now, it's not a table query. It would be like a value list. So we could just type in the 5 boroughs. So something like Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, Staten Island, and queens. I believe those are all the ones. So we're now going to go back to the datasheet view. Of course, it's going to ask to save it. And now when we click in here, you're going to have a drop down and you can actually select one of the 5, right? So really cool. Awesome. Now the question is, can I type something else in here? Like, I don't know, New Jersey. Yep, I can. So clearly that's a problem. And we're going to go back to the design view. And the problem that we have here is that we didn't choose one of the properties that's really important. And that property is limit to list. So we have to change this from no to yes. Okay. And that's very, very important. So one of the things about the combo box is that it has this field property and it allows us to limit the list to only those things that are in the actual list. Okay. So then in that case, if we try to add new things, we would not be able to do it anymore. So really that's what we want, right? If we try to put new things in, it says the text you entered isn't an item in the list. Do you want to edit the items in the list? Okay. So I would just have to pick one of them. So that's awesome. Now, as is often the case in life, there are multiple ways to do something, and this is no different. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and create a new table. I'll go to table design, and it's just going to have one field. It's going to be area with short text, and I'll just make that a primary key. And then what I'll do is I'll go to datasheet view. We'll save this. We'll call it area city, and we'll just name it like that. And I'm just going to put the different areas that we talked about. So the 5 boroughs of New York City. So we've got Brooklyn, Manhattan, Bronx, Staten Island, and Queens. So that's awesome. So we can close that up. That's now saved. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go back to our customers 1 table, and we are going to pick select the area city field. We're going to go back to lookups. We're going to keep combo box, but we're going to change from value list to table query. And then for row source, just click inside of row source. And what you're going to notice is that one of the tables that's available to us is the area city table that I just created. So this is a lookup, and you're using the source being the table. So I pick here area city. So I'm just going to go back now to the datasheet view. As always, we have to save things. And when you go in here and you try to enter something, well, here it is. You have the different options just like you had before. And you'll see that, in fact, it is using that table because I intentionally, when I put Staten Island the first time, I intentionally didn't leave a space in between. And you can actually see the order is slightly different as well. Yeah, so this is the different way of doing it. So hopefully you now get a better understanding of lookups. All right, so I thought I'd add another video to make you even more comfortable when working with your fields in Design View. So let's open up the customers table to Design View. So we know how to highlight or select one of the fields. So let's select facts. Of course, we left click with our mouse. But what if we wanted to select more than one of the fields? Well, if we have one selected, we can just hold Shift and then left click of the mouse, left click, and select more of these. So then we could delete them if we wanted to, for example. And one way to delete is simply to hit the delete button on your keyboard. There we are. I'll just put no this in this case. But we can also go up here where it says delete rows. So it's under Table Tools Design and then delete rows. So same thing right there to delete these fields. Really simple to do. Another thing that you can do, let's say you wanted to add a new field, you can certainly do that. Let's say I wanted to add it above city. I can select city by left clicking with the mouse, and then I can right click. Again, make sure you're in this gray spot right here. So first left click mouse to select the city field, and then right click inside of it and put in insert row. And what it does is it leaves space for you to add a new field right above city. So that's exactly there. So we can type something in there. To delete it, again, in this area, if we right click, we can just put delete row. So really, really simple. The final thing is you might want to move these around. Simple to do again. Let's say I wanted to put the fax after the address or something like that. You want to left click mouse and then just move it up. Okay. Let me just do that again. Fax and then move it wherever you want. After address, let's say, like that. So you just hold on to your left mouse button as you move it up. Simple. Thanks for joining me for this lesson. All right, everybody, welcome back. Glad you've decided to continue your learning journey. This is an introduction to reports. If you remember in the introduction for tables, I said that tables are where we store our data. So what are reports then? Well, reports are simply our output. So we're going to get going. We'll get right into it. Quite a bit to cover in this lecture. I want you to select the customers table as I have here. I want you to go to create right up here. And then in the ribbon here, we are going to click on Report Wizard. Now, why Report Wizard and not these other options here? Well, simple reason is the Report Wizard already sets us up with a bit of a template that we can modify. And it really lays out the structure nicely. And this is really useful for you guys who are learning. You're going to get to appreciate the different elements that a report is made up of, and we'll be able to modify it and all that fun stuff, less work. So it makes sense to use it even when you have a lot more experience. So when we click on this report wizard, this is what we get. The first thing that it asks us is which fields do you want on your report? You can choose from more than one table or query. So we're just going to select this customers table and we'll just pick a few fields. Let's say customer ID and maybe just, let's see, contact, title, address, and maybe phone. So 4 of those. Do you want to add any grouping levels? We won't add grouping. This is really useful for reports, but we won't worry about that for now. You can also sort records by up to 4 fields. So what do we want to sort it by? Well, we won't select anything for now. We'll just hit next. Layout orientation, I keep it at tabular and I keep it at portrait, and I keep this checked. We'll just go next. Title for your report, again, you can give a title if you want. I'll just keep it the way it is. And that's all the information it needs to create a little report. We're going to choose to preview the report before looking at the design. So let's finish. And this is the report. It's really that simple. And what you'll notice here, this is our title, customers in blue. And this is the report header. And the report header, you see it at the beginning of the report. This down here, you notice customer, contact title, address, phone. These are the page headers. And page headers are on every page. And you'll see that in just a second. Down here, these are page footers, the date and which page it is. Page headers, like page footers, are on every page. So you'll notice now, when I click on this next page down here, you will notice indeed, footer is there again. Now it says, of course, page 2 of 3. And you'll notice again that on this next page, we also have the headers. So page headers, again, on every page. Report header, only at the start of the report. So that is the difference. And of course, we have one more page. Third page, there goes again the page header and the page footer. Great. So at this point, we'll just click on the close print preview. And what it does is it takes us to our design view for reports. And you will notice, again, we have here first a report header. Again, report header is just at the beginning of a report, not on every page. Page headers are on every page. You see something called the detail. This is the most important element because this is what actually displays our data. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in just a second. There you see now the page footer. Again, page footer is on every page. And then the report footer is at the end of the data portion of the report. So a report footer at the end of the actual report. So the actual data of the report, and the page footer is the end of the report period. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, if we take a look here under the page header, what is this right here? What this is, it's one of the controls, and this is a label control. It's one of the simplest controls, and we'll talk about controls actually in the next video, but it's a label control because that's what it does for us. That is why on every page we see a label. Okay, so it is this, and to create a label is right up here. So if we wanted to create our own, we would click on it right here under report design tools. Under design, you have a bunch of different controls that we can create. One of them is that label. The other one, you will see it under detail, and it is the text box, and the text box is right here, the one that you see AB on. And you're probably a little bit familiar with the text box if you remember the lecture on lookups, and there we talked about the text box. So the fact that we can display our data, our actual data, is because of this text box. So this right here is a text box, this right here is a text box, and so forth. So that's really important to understand, and we'll, as I said, we'll get more into controls. Final thing I want to show you is, in this video, is the add existing fields right here. So if you click on this, it's going to show you all of the fields from our table. So if you wanted to add something, you simply can. You would just drag it over wherever you wanted it to go. See you in the next video. All right, and welcome back. So in this video, what I want to show you is how you can go about moving around, aligning, resizing the different components of your report. Remember, in the previous videos, I talked about the fact that our report is made up of a report header, and the report header begins when the data begins. So it's right before the actual data is presented. The page header represents what's on top of every single page. So let's say we have 5 pages. It's going to be on top of every single page. The detail under that is where our data actually is. We have a page footer. Again, a page footer is going to be on every single page at the bottom of that page. So bottom of page 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And then we have a report footer. Difference between that and the page footer, of course, is the report footer is right at the end of the data. So also remember how I mentioned that this, for example, are label controls, and so is this right here. These are text box controls right under detail. These right here actually under the page footer. These are also text box controls. Now the difference between this one and this one is that this is called a calculated control, and I'll talk more about what that is later, while this would be a bound control, and these labels would actually be considered unbound controls. So I'm going to have 3 specific lectures addressing the different kinds of controls that you can have. We just happen to have all 3 right in this report. So that's really useful. But the point here is I'm going to show you, as I said, movement, resizing, alignment type of stuff in this one. So the main thing that people tend to confuse here is moving the text within the actual control. So for example, they get confused with, let's say I click on customers here. If I go to arrange, I go to control margins, and I go narrow, watch what happens with the text. So the customer's text inside of the control. Okay, notice that it nudged a little bit. It's changed a little bit. So that only changes how the text is positioned, the margins within the actual control. So it moves the text inside of the control. It doesn't actually move the control itself, right? So if you wanted to move the control, on the other hand, actually, let's first just go back to layout view so I can show you. So you notice the customers is over here. If I go to layout view, now if I actually wanted to move the customers itself, I wanted to center it somewhere else, the actual control, not the text inside, I would notice when you have the 4 arrows going the 4 different ways, when I have that, I could actually move it if I wanted to center it like that. And then if I go back to the layout view, now that label is right there. So that's a key thing to remember. Are you trying to move the actual text inside of the control, or are you actually trying to do something with the control itself? So let me go back to the layout view, and you'll notice actually here that this label says customer, but we actually know that the label is actually customer ID. So we have a little problem that we can fix there. And the way we can do that is, first, we want those 4 arrows, east, north, west, south. We move it a little bit, and then we want to be right here. We want those arrows west and east, meaning we can make this bigger. And now notice that you can actually see customer ID. You can see the whole thing. And if you go back to layout view, you're actually going to see that now you can see customer ID. So that's awesome. It's that easy to actually change that. Now, notice that what's happened now is because we've moved this one a little bit over to make sure that there was enough space to show the whole label of this field. This is now the rows themselves are a little bit not aligned. So if we actually go back then to design view, we can do this in a much simpler way. You don't actually have to physically move this one. So what we can do is customer ID label is now selected. Hold down the shift and then just left click on your mouse on the one in the bottom. And if you go to arrange, you can go to align and you can say to the left here, and it actually moves over the data portion to go along with where the label is. So if I go back now to layout view, now it's exactly where I wanted. So you can actually, if you move the labels and then you wanted to make sure that the data followed it, you could, go ahead and just hold down shift and you can actually, highlight and select all these controls at the same time and then just move them over. So really, really simple to do. Let me just show you a few other things. You can change how wide the report is, go off here to the side, and again, once you see these west-east arrows, you can move like that. I'll just undo that part. Now, what if you wanted, I'll go back here, what if I wanted more space between my actual records? So I thought this was a little bit tight here, and I wanted more space. I'm pretty sure in your head you already know how you would do that. I would go right here, and as soon as I see the north-south arrows, I would hold on to left and just go down. And now if I go back to the layout view, look at the space in between each record or each row. So there's more space. Maybe I like it that way, maybe I don't like it, but it's really up to you to change it to how you like. All right, so let's talk about unbound controls. Really the simplest of the controls when it comes to access, and labels are a really good example of this. Take this label that we have here for our report header, and the reason that we say that this is unbound is that this label or any label does not require a link or a source to make the label appear. So it's not like we need to take this label and somehow make a link between our label and our table or a field in the table to make this label show up. And I think that we can agree that this does make a lot of sense. It would be kind of odd if you had to link a label back to a particular table or a field for it to display. I mean, let's say we just wanted a grand total at the end of our report, and just for that label to show up, we somehow had to link that label back to the table or a particular field. Let's say there was a grand total field. Well, it really should not take linking it like that for just a simple label to show up on our report. All right, so let's talk about bounded controls now. And you probably have a pretty good idea of what a bounded control is now that we covered unbounded controls. And a bounded control simply means that it is linked to something. There's a source to it. If we click here on the customer ID control under detail, this is a text box. First, we can confirm that it's a text box. I want you to, after you select it, click on property sheet. And you will see right under here, it says selection type text box. So first it will tell you that it's a text box. By the way, same thing if you click on the label, it will tell you that you've clicked on a label. So let's go back here to this text box. If you now go over, this is, by the way, the property sheet, just like we saw the properties for tables in design view, these are the properties for reports. It just so happens that there's many more properties for reports. So they're not displayed on the bottom here as they were in tables. So that's the reason why. In any case, if you click here on data, you'll notice something that says here control source. And the control source, if you go here, happens to be the field customer ID in our customers table. So it has a source. Why does it have a source? Why does it need to have a source? Well, it needs to have a source because this customer ID control is not just displaying text, it has to actually display data. So it is this control, this text box control, that's making it possible, if we go back to layout view, for the data to actually show up. So it goes beyond displaying just any text. We actually have to display a particular thing, in this case, the customer IDs. So that's why that's called a bounded control. And specifically, whenever you link to a table or a query, we call that a bounded control. All right, so let's now talk about calculated controls. And the only difference between a bounded control and a calculated control is the source. So in the case of bounded control, the source is a field in a table or a query. In the case of calculated controls, the source is an expression. And an expression is simply a combo of operators, let's say an equal sign, a plus sign, control names, field names, functions that return a single value, and constant values. So here, if we look at the page footer, an example of a calculated control is right here. We have one expression, that's the equal sign, and that always begins an expression. And then we have the now function. And the now function returns the current date. So if we go back to the layout view and we go down to the page footer, the fact that the date is being displayed here is due to that expression and due to this calculated control. So if we actually click on it and go to design here and the property sheet, if we look at the control source as we did in the last video, you will see that the control source is this expression. You'll also notice that it's also a text box, just like this bounded control up here. The only difference is that the control source is now different. The expression is the control source now instead of a field in a table. All right, welcome back. So this lecture is all about getting you comfortable working with controls so you can create professional looking reports in Access. The first thing, of course, that you want to make sure to do is to download the December 2019 orders database that has been made available to you. And I wanted to work with this table because it has some fields that you will commonly find inside of a report. So I want you to double left click with your mouse on this table just so we can look at what we're dealing with here, if you haven't had a chance to look at it. And then we're going to go straight up to create. And in the ribbon here, I want you to click on Report Wizard. And then we're going to just pick some of these fields. So we'll pick last name, we'll pick order name, we'll pick order date, we'll pick product name, and then we will pick unit price and quantity. And then we will go next. Then next after that, it asks you here what sort order do you want for your records, and I will pick a sort order. So we will first go by order date and then by order number. All right, so that's cool. And then we'll go next. No change to the layout of the report. I usually go with tabular and portrait, and this is fine to be checked off. I won't change the title of the report for now, at least. That's fine. And it asks you here if you want to preview the report or modify the report's design. We're going to start with previewing, and then we will of course start with the modification. So I will put finish. And right away, this looks pretty decent, but we can see that there are certainly some problems, like the dates are not showing quite right, but all of that is easy to change. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and we're going to close the print preview. We're going to fix up a couple of things here. You'll notice here that the records for order date are not showing quite well. Same thing with the quantity label. The quantities are showing fine, but the quantity label is just a little bit not showing that well. So we're going to fix those two. You go up here to close the print preview. And then all I'm going to do is for order date, under detail, I'm just going to push it a little bit this way. Okay. And then if I go back to the layout view, you'll now notice that it is perfectly showing how I want it. So we can go back to the design view. Remember here, the problem is not that the actual data is not showing up, it's the label. So instead of clicking down here, that's not the problem. The problem is the label here. So we would want to make it a little bit bigger, maybe even move unit price a little bit over. But now the label should be showing. So if I go back to layout view, there it is perfectly showing for us. I want you to take note of one more thing before we move on and create some controls. Is if you look at the order number field here and the values in it, you will notice that these values are right aligned. On the other hand, if you take a look at the prod name field, you'll notice that these values here are left aligned. And that is because by default, numeric field types are right aligned and text fields are left aligned. We can easily change that if we wanted to. We won't do that right now, but if we go over back to the design view, we can simply click here on order number, and under design, we go to property sheet, and under format, you will find here it says text align, and we could change that from general to left, center, right, distribute, whatever we want. Right now it is on general. Now I've gone ahead and done a little bit more cleaning up here so we have space to put in our new text box. So you are 1 minute into the future. Congratulations to you guys. So you'll notice now here that we have space for our text box and the label here under the page header. So I'm going to get going. So let's say you wanted to add an extra field like a totals field where you wanted to take your unit price and times it by your quantity to get a totals field. Well, this is exactly where you would want to do something like that. You, of course, would not want to add a totals field inside of the actual table itself. So let's say you have an orders table. You don't want to actually put that in the table. You want to be able to decide what you want to put on that report when it comes time, right? So I'm going to go here. This is the text box. So what you want to make sure is that it's selected like that. And then what we want to do is go in here, look and realize that I'm under detail, not under the page header, because it's under the detail where you put your text boxes. And then you're just going to go like that. The first thing that you want to do is text boxes by default have the label attached to them. What you want to do with that is you want to actually just select it and delete it. You'll see in just a second why you want to go ahead and delete it. So I'll just work on this a little bit here. And what I'm going to do, maybe we'll make this slightly bigger. And what we're going to do next is, it says inbound in there. We can actually start with an equal sign. So you're always going to start any type of expression like that. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use these square brackets. Whenever you use square brackets, you're saying that you are going to use a particular field. So I'm going to put in unit price. Then I'm going to do the closing square brackets. Then I'm going to use the asterisk. The asterisk is times. Then I'm going to do, again, the square brackets, and I'm going to put in the name of the other field that I want to involve in this. And then, of course, we're going to need the closing square brackets. And when you do that, you can hit enter. Brilliant. Now, why did I delete the label? Okay, so the reason is you actually want to go, let's say right here, the quantity, and simply control copy and then control V, or yeah, control V. You'll notice it actually took it all the way over here. It didn't, I guess, have enough space. And I'll drag it back here. And the reason you just want to copy and paste is it's going to take the same formatting that this label had and give it the same formatting. So you want that because sometimes what happens is a certain label will have a different border, for example. So then you have a different border for each of your labels and the report kind of looks unprofessional and kind of odd. So then you can actually just put in here total. Okay. Now we're going to go backwards. We're going to actually go back and make this a little bit smaller. We don't need it to be that big. Maybe even we'll move the total slightly over here. And this like this. So there is a little playing around that you would do with this stuff. And then what we're going to do, maybe even a little bit more, we want it to fit all on the same page, but we're going to go now back to the layout view. And you'll notice we are actually very close to the page. So we will go magically into the future about 1 minute again, and you're going to now see the layout, and I've worked on it just a little bit. And you will notice now that everything looks good. Here is that total that we created. So now you have experience with putting in a text box and creating a calculated control. It's really that easy. The only difference here, the only thing we might want to get rid of is this border that it has around it. And it's really simple to do that. So if we go back to design view, I want you to go to home. I want you to select this quantity field. Then I want you to click here, format painter. And then I want you to left click on this new field that we created. Okay. So now if we go back to the layout view, you're going to notice that it actually got rid of that border. So by using format painter, what it does is it literally, when you select the initial field, you're selecting the format that field has, and then by left clicking on that new field that you created, it applies that same format to it. All right, welcome back everybody to this lecture. This lecture, I want to show you how to add a grand total to the report. And it is important to understand the different components of a report to do this properly. I did mention the different components of a report earlier on in the course. So you want to know what the report header is, what the page header is, what detail is, what page footer is, and what report footer is. So in our case, we want this grand total to be at the end of the data of the report. So that is what the report footer is for. We don't want to put it in the page footer because the page footer is literally at the bottom of each page. Okay, so we don't want it there. We want it right after the data. So we want it here. So let's move this down here to create a platform where we can actually put our button on top of it. We'll go to design, And then right here, this is of course our text box. We make sure that it's selected. And then we're going to drag it out like that. What do we do first? Well, we don't need this label, so we'll just get rid of it. Next, we're going to click inside of the text box. We always start with the equal sign, and I'm going to use the sum function to get the grand total. So because of that, we're going to need opening parentheses. Then we'll use the opening square brackets and put in our first field, which of course is unit price. Then we're going to do the closing square brackets. Then we'll do the times, which is the asterisk. Then we'll put in the second field here, quantity. That is why we use the square brackets, of course, when we want to input our field. And then we need one closing parentheses. So that is it. We now have the expression we need to show the grand total. Now I want you to go ahead and click on the text box and make sure up here you're at design. And then I want you to click property sheet. I want you to make sure that under format and then here format, I want you to make sure that currency is selected. Because when we go back, of course, to our layout view, what you want, of course, is you want it to be showing with the $sign. So that looks pretty good. Only thing you might want to do is, and you can do it on layout view as well, though I suggest you do most of the changes in design view. You can actually just decrease that like that, and that looks better for sure. And then let's go back to design view, and the other thing that we have to now do is we have to create a label. I think that will look good. So like a grand total label. So this, if you go over it, will tell you what it is. This is, of course, the label selection. We're not looking for the text box. We're looking for the label. And then you're just going to go like this. And then in there, we'll just type grand total with the colon. And that is it. You can hit enter. And then here you sometimes get a warning because it wants you to associate a label with the control. So we will do that. And that is that. So there's the grand total. Whoops, I think we pushed it a little bit too far there. I'm going to undo that. Let's see how this looks. We'll go back to the layout view. Grand total, there we go. So maybe a little bit too much of a space there. Maybe we can push it a little bit more. And this is exactly why I don't like looking at this in the layout view, because it doesn't show you as you're dragging it, how you're dragging it. It just shows you at the end. The design view shows you where it's going as you're doing it, so it works well. That is pretty perfect. We can do a little bit of an improvement here. Again, it doesn't show you how much you're moving it, but I think that right there is pretty damn perfect. So we've got our label now, we've got our grand total, and it's all great. Hope you had fun with that. All right, welcome back everybody. So let me show you how you would go about sorting and grouping in your report. When you're in design view, make sure design is selected here. And then on your left side, you should see in the ribbon, group and sort. Simply left click with your mouse on that. You'll notice that the sort is already done by order date and then by order number. And this is because when we went through the report wizard, we actually selected this. So next though, we can add a group, and maybe you want that group to be the order number field. And then if you click here on more, you have more options. So you can add totals. So maybe I want totals that are based on the product code. Now you can count the actual values if you want, or you can count the number of records. And then I'll just go ahead and show subtotal in the group footer. And you noticed in the design view that there was a change And because that footer for order numbers was added right here, as you can see, it's been added, and also an order number header. Now you're going to see a lot of space when I go back to layout because they added this header right here, but we're not actually using it right now. So we can get rid of it if we want, or we can just go right here where it says with header section. We can choose without a header section. Again, you have the same option, but we actually do have something in our order footer, but we could select it without a footer section. We can also choose to do not keep group together on one page. We can choose keep whole group together on one page, or keep header and first record together on one page. So let's see what we have so far. We can go back to layout view, and this is what we have. So on the side here, it is giving us a total of products for each individual. Something very, very, of course, simplistic. But go ahead, play around with the grouping, and if you need any help, do not be afraid to contact me. And hello everybody, and welcome back. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about conditional formatting. And conditional formatting is all about a particular control meeting a certain rule or condition that we set up. And if it meets that condition, we can, for example, give it a particular color so it stands out in our reports. So let me give you an example. So remember here in our order number footer, we have a count of how many products each customer acquired. Well, if we click on this control, you will notice that under Report Design Tools and then under Format, there is something here in the ribbon called Conditional Formatting. So again, what it requires you to do is to be under Report Design Tools, not under Design, but under Format here. And what it requires is for you to actually click, left click with your mouse on this particular control, and then that becomes available for us. So we'll click on that, and I'll delete this one and do it again. But it tells you first that it's showing the formatting rules for this particular control. And then what we want to do is when we want to go to new rule, and then you want to select a rule type. In this case, it's just going to check values in the current record. So we're going to select that one. And then here, we're going to just say field value is, and then here I'm going to pick greater than, and we can pick, let's say, greater than 4. And down here, the first thing that you're going to pick is a background color if this condition occurs. So maybe we want, we'll pick this color for the background. And then here you can pick the font color right here. So maybe we want that font to be yellow is okay. So if this field, this is in particular a count of products, is greater than 4, or maybe let's do, 4 is okay. This is going to turn this color. It's going to have this background color and it's going to have this font for the text. So we'll do OK and we'll apply that. And then we will go back to the layout view and see what we have. And look at that, my friends. I'll go right up to the top. You'll notice here, these don't have any kind of formatting. But if we go down and we see the ones that are greater than 4, like this one here, which is 11, this one here, 5, it has applied that format for us. So it allows really for things in our report that we find important, that we want to stand out based on certain conditions, to be formatted in a way that we like.